So today, we're going to dive into a really important piece of legislation in India, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016. Now, this wasn't just some small update to an old law. It was a huge, fundamental shift in how society thinks about disability, moving away from an old model of charity to a new one based on rights and full participation. Let's break down what makes this act such a game changer. Here's how we're going to walk through it. First, we'll talk about the big idea, the new way of thinking. Then we'll see how the very definition of disability got a whole lot bigger. After that, we'll get into the 5 key rights the Act guarantees, and we'll zoom in on the classroom. Then we'll look at how these rights are actually put into practice, and finally, we'll wrap up with why this all matters so much. All right, first up, the big idea. To really get why this law is so powerful, you have to understand the massive philosophical shift it represents. It's a complete break from an old, outdated way of thinking. And this slide lays it out perfectly. On one side, you had the old charity model, which kind of looked at people with disabilities as objects of pity who needed help. But on the other side, you have the new rights-based model. This sees them as empowered citizens who have an equal right to everything. This single change, right here, is the engine that drives the entire act. So what's the official purpose? Well, it's spelled out right here: to protect dignity, make sure everyone has equal opportunities, and push for full inclusion. This act actually replaced an older one from 1995, and it was a huge step to get India's laws in line with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Pretty big deal. So let's move on. If you're going to guarantee more rights to more people, you first have to recognize more people. And that meant the law had to cast a much, much wider net. Can you believe this? The old law from 1995 was incredibly narrow. It only officially recognized 7 types of disabilities. Just 7. That meant millions of people were basically invisible in the eyes of the law, with no access to the protections they needed. So that raises a pretty obvious question, right? What about things like learning disabilities, or autism, or mental illness? Well, under the old law, they just weren't on the list, and that created these massive gaps in support and in rights. And this is where the 2016 Act made a truly dramatic change. It took that list of 7 and expanded it to 21 recognized disabilities. That's a 3-fold increase. It made the law so much more inclusive and, frankly, more in touch with reality. And here you can see the real-world impact. By officially recognizing conditions like autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities like dyslexia, and mental illness, the law brought so many people out of the shadows. This was a huge step forward, making sure a much wider group of people could finally claim their rights. Okay, so with this wider, more inclusive definition in place, the Act could then build its pillars of empowerment. And these aren't just a random list of rules. Think of them as the actual foundations for a truly inclusive society. And these 5 pillars, they all work together. First up, the right to equality and non-discrimination, period. Next, the right to education, and we'll dig into that one more in a sec. Then, the right to employment, which is backed up by a 4% reservation in government jobs. Then, a crucial one, accessibility. This means barrier-free access to buildings, to public transport, to technology. And holding it all together is the fundamental right to dignity and respect, protecting people from abuse and exploitation. Now, let's zoom in on one of the most important areas this law transformed, the classroom. What the Act says about education is so critical for teachers, for families, and, of course, for the students themselves. I think this quote just perfectly captures the spirit of the law's approach to education. It's so simple, but so profound. Every child can learn, but differently. It's about shifting our whole mindset from expecting the child to fit into the system to expecting the system to fit the child. And this isn't just a nice thought. The Act puts real, concrete requirements in place. It guarantees free education for children with disabilities from age 6 to 18. It says schools have to be inclusive, they have to provide adjustments for students, and they have to make sure teachers get specialized training. It's all about providing that individualized support so that no child gets left behind. Okay, but let's be real. A law is only as good as its implementation, right? So how does the RPwD Act actually turn these big ideas into everyday reality? Let's look at how it works on the ground. So at the very heart of making this work is a legal concept called reasonable accommodation. The best way to think about it is this. It's not about giving someone an unfair advantage. It's about making sure everyone gets to start the race from the same starting line. It's all about making those necessary tweaks to the environment to level the playing field. So what does that actually look like? Well, it can be pretty practical things, like giving a student extra time on an exam, or offering books in Braille, allowing someone to use assistive technology, or maybe providing a scribe to help with writing. These are all tangible, real-world solutions. And the Act sets up a whole system to make sure this stuff happens. The government has to create policies and appoint commissioners to watch over everything. There are special courts to handle cases quickly. And maybe most importantly, this law has teeth. There are actual penalties for discrimination and abuse, which creates real accountability. Okay, let's pull all these threads together. At the end of the day, why does this act matter so much? Well, its impact goes way beyond just the legal text. It touches millions of lives, and it's literally helping to reshape society. If you wanted to boil this entire incredible act down to just one sentence, this would be it. It's a fantastic summary. The Act ensures that every single person with a disability gets equal rights, opportunities, respect, and the support they need to live a dignified life. That's it. That's the promise.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The law puts the framework in place. It guarantees inclusion. But turning that guarantee on a piece of paper into a lived, daily reality for everyone, well, that's on all of us. So the real question is, how do we, you and I, make it our reality?